Welcome to the New Music Forum interview. Today, our special guest is Shanti Jayasinha, who is a fantastic multi-instrumentalist, composer and arranger. I believe he plays trumpet, cello, probably some other things. And also with us today is Orphy Robinson, MBE. And I'm Ivors Neame, and Orphy and I are going to be interviewing Shanti today about his piece Sandunga for big band and how he came up with this piece. So, Shanti, how has the lockdown been for you?
Hi. It's been an amazing opportunity to reset, to take care of myself, take care of the family, go for long walks, do lots of yoga, lots of reading, and lots of practice, actually. And I've been trying to work on some projects as well. One is this piece, which is still in progress, the recording of it, that is. And another is an album with my partner, who's Claire Foster, the singer, and where she's making an album of standards, which is all arranged in different Latin American rhythms.
Right.
So I've been arranging that, producing that.
That sounds like an amazing amount of work. I think with a lot of musicians that sort of speak to, everyone's found a different way to make use of the time. As in, some said, right, I needed to write an album of stuff, or I needed to do this, or I'm going to do it now. Got no excuse.
No, exactly.
Yeah,
I mean, there's a few other projects as well. I mean, apart from that, my regular teaching, I normally teach on a Saturday at Centre for Young Musicians, which is the London-wide music school, music centre. They use about 4 or 5 different buildings in the area of South Lambeth, North Lambeth, Lambeth North. They use Morley College and a few other places. But that's all moved online. So instead of doing like 6 hours on a Saturday, I now do 3 hours on a Saturday, and then all my one-to-one teaching is spread out through the week,
Yeah.
And I've got some students that are back at school, so we have to fit around them as well.
Mm. How do you go about incorporating the Latin American rhythms into your music, or what draws you to that kind of music? And because you mentioned that you're doing that with your partner as well, and so what is it about that music that is so attractive?
Well, I mean, if I go back a bit of my backstory, I started as a classical musician at school, but I really got into jazz in my late teens, and in the sort of like the old-fashioned way, I discovered Louis Armstrong and then Miles, and then just went through chronologically, like by chance, really. And really got to Freddie Hubbard at some point, and Woody Shaw, and I went to university and did sciences, but I was just playing music a lot, classical and a bit of jazz. And then I left university, decided let's give music a go. I moved to London. I ended up going to loads of jam sessions, and someone like Mark Donlan, actually, I remember, he told me, "Why don't you audition for the Guildhall?" So I did, and so I actually ended up doing a year at the postgrad at the Guildhall in jazz, and that's how I started the network. But that was about 1987, and at the same time, being on the London scene, you just meet people because everything's in London, isn't it? So I ended up playing a lot of reggae, African music. I was playing in a band called Somo Somo, where the guitarist called Fan Fan Mosese. A lot of soca, and I got asked to play with Roberto Pla, and that just blew my mind because he's like the best band in the UK, and that was the first salsa gig I played was Roberto.
Wow.
And I'm just like an inquisitive person. I go, wow, this is amazing. Why is it amazing? What are you doing? So I was like asking all the percussionists, what's that pattern you're playing? How do you do this? How do you do that? And that's been the way I've lived my life, really. Whatever music I'm playing, I'm asking, how does that work? And I've played a lot of Indian music. Uh, and at one point in the 90s, my dad moved to Java
Oh,
with a young family. And when I visited them, I used to go out and travel around. And I remember spending a whole day in a village in Bali. Just and most villages have got a central building, which is their gamelan.
Of course.
wow.
And so yeah, I'm just trying to eat up everything that I hear and that I don't understand and try and work it out. And anyway, so Latin music really excited me, and I got into playing. 90s was basically playing Latin music, salsa bands, and Brazilian music, plus a few other things. But that was a major part of my work. And doing it, you know, I don't want to be like a session musician, like a brass player. They come in, they're the dots, read them.
Yeah.
I want to know how it works, and read about it, and you know, I've got loads of albums. So
did you have like your family background? Did you know your mum, your dad, granddad? Did anybody else play music?
Very much, yeah. I grew up in a musical family. My mother went to the Royal College of Music, studied flute and piano, and then spent her whole life as a music teacher. My dad grew up in Sri Lanka, and he grew up in a family with 11 children, so they couldn't afford instruments. But he went to a very nice school and sang in the choir and was really keen on classical music. And so I had that sort of surrounding me as a young child.
Do you sometimes think about the, you know, Latin music's relationship to the African diaspora?
Completely, yes.
In a way, like the importance of that in jazz, I think, which gets maybe underestimated sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, a great example is in a salsa tune, after the melody, there's the section where the chorus sings and the lead singer sings in between. So that's call and response, which is completely African in concept. And even when the brass section do their bit, it's all about one section doing one line and another section answering them contrapunctally. And it's like, I mean, I've read a book called, hang on, it's up here. I'll just have a look at it. There, this one. Great book. This is African Rhythm, African Sensibility.
Wow.
And he talks about the social side of music in West Africa. He studied in Ghana, and the way that one rhythm is meaningless without another rhythm to go against it, to give it meaning.
That's
so,
very interesting.
Yeah, so there's this concept of the way that different lines interact, which, yeah, I mean, and in my piece that we're discussing, that after the trumpet solo, there's a section where all the brass come in this way. It builds up. I can't remember who comes in first, but maybe the saxophones do a line, the trombones do an answering line, the trumpets do another answering line, and it just builds to a crescendo.
So how do you incorporate the improvisation into your writing for large ensemble music?
Good question. Maybe I don't really think about it. I mean, composition, what has Wayne Shorter said, composition is improvising slowed down and improvising is composition sped up.
Yes, that's so true. Yes, I've heard that one.
And I don't, yeah. I mean, sometimes, sometimes I might come up with a chord sequence and then just mess around, maybe record myself playing over it, see if any good ideas come. And sometimes I just do it like bit by bit. What's the next note? Do it slowly, you know. What's the best next note, or what's the best next chord, or whatever. So it's strange. I mean, there's another story behind this piece, which is in 1959 in Cuba, an album was released by a band called Los Amigos. No, not Los Amigos. Grupo Cubano de Moderna. Oh, what's it called now? Hang on. Grupo Cubano de Música Moderna, by Frank Emilio Flynn, who's the piano player.
Yeah.
And he wrote a piece called Gandinga, Mondongo y Sandunga, which has got a really interesting rhythm. And it's one of those rhythms that, Latin musicians go, it's one of those challenges.
Right.
Can you play that? Can you play this part?
Mm-hmm.
And then if you're on the scene and you're in with good musicians, someone might, or in a jam session, someone might just start it off, because there's not much melody in it. It's basically a groove.
Right.
It's like accents spread out over a couple of bars.
Mm.
It seems like the bass line.
Then,
oh, sorry, go on.
That was right. Well, I was just saying that it also, by chance, in 1959, John Coltrane released Giant Steps.
Mm-hmm.
And I just was musing one day, and I just sort of thought about these two things. And there's 6 accents in the Frank Emilio tune, and there's 6 chords in the Coltrane harmony.
Mm-hmm.
Or what if you just put one on top of the other? Tried it out, and I thought, wow, maybe I'm onto something. So I made a chord sequence. Then I just had to try and write a melody over this crazy chord sequence.
Yeah.
But the groove in the piece is it divided in 5 in some way, like the basic ostinato?
Well, it's funny because when you first hear it, you go, well, how is it split up? It's like a dum dum ding dum dum da da da. You think, well, it's really difficult to get a grip on it, but it's actually just in 4/4. It's like this. Dum dum ding dum 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 ding dum dum dum. So that's the 6 accents.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the original, where it just goes, the bass line just goes root 5 root 5 root.
Yeah, because I mean, that was the immediate influence that I heard on listening to it, and thought, whoa, that's neat. It was one of those sort of moments you think, so I can imagine those eureka moments we have sometimes when you listen to it, you think, these things are totally in other places, but actually, essentially, there's a real good kind of synergy there between them as well.
Yeah. I actually worked with Frank Emilio because I went to Cuba in 1999.
Great.
And a friend of mine, Sarah McGuinness, who's a piano player on the Cuban scene and also the African scene in London, teaches at SOAS. She introduced me to Frank Emilio, and I just watched the rehearsal, and then he said, "Oh, come on, let's play." So, and he wanted me to play Misty with him, and I can't get started. He said, "Okay, right, next week we have got a gig. You're going to come and play with us." So I played with this band Los Amigos, which is a band he's had from the 70s. I think I can't remember when it started, but a lot of the same musicians came into that band that were in the original band. Cachayito from Buena Vista. That was playing bass. So yeah, I played a concert in Cuba, in Havana, in La Casa de la Música. And then Frank Emilio came to London in 2000 for a Cuban festival, which was at the Barbican. And he did a solo concert, but he asked me to join him, so I played a couple of tunes with him.
Oh, lovely.
In that, and then I played again with him a couple of times in Germany.
Right.
Just happened to be on the same festival with another band. And he said, "Oh yeah, come and play, come and join in," But that tune is still in his set. That Gandinga Mondongo Sandunga is still in the set.
Wow. How important is swing feel? Was one of the questions to you and your writing for large ensemble.
Swing for gosh, not in this tune.
Yeah.
What about in general? Like, other do you use that? I mean, or is that kind of something that's not, you're not interested in that anymore? I mean, like, I guess in the kind of very traditional sense, but I mean, we could talk about like what swing is anyway. But I mean,
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because when you play in a jazz gig and the audience is listening to a lot of swing, even though it might be the best groove, there's a moment in the gig, maybe they suddenly go Latin, and everyone kind of goes, "Oh wow!" It kind of takes it up. But similarly, it could go the other way around. You could be in a Latin gig, and then suddenly the band goes to swing, and then everyone goes, "Oh, that's nice." So um, I haven't really. I don't think I've written any big band music in swing, but I've written plenty of tunes in swing.
Sure.
And I love playing jazz in swing time, But
Yeah.
I suppose I've just got too many influences in my music, and really, there's so many people doing it so well. Why?
Yeah, right.
Why would I do it?
do you have ways of getting that way of phrasing though that we all love, from jazz in terms of the rhythmic elasticity? Do you have ways of getting that into more, for example, 16th note subdivided music like Latin? Or is it always like a question of playing directly on the beat, or do you have ways of delay?
Yeah, there's a lot of interpretation going on here. So the salsa was invented in New York, and a lot of the musicians, especially the horn players, would have been some Latinos, but also a lot of jazz musicians. And so the phrasing, if you listen to Fania records from the 70s and 80s, you'll find that a lot of the phrasing is a little bit laid back. But then if you listen to Cuban musicians, it's completely not. It's like on, bam. If you're not, and I've had I've been in the studio with like a jazz saxophone player or something trying to do a Latin track, and they're accusing me of playing ahead of the beat. And I'm going, no, I'm actually playing with the thing, but we'll find a compromise,
Yeah.
A feel thing. But if there are certain things you can't delay. You can delay. I mean, when you play rumba, it's very free. The improvising, even though the rhythm is really complex, you kind of float across it. Da 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 da. You do this free kind of phrasing. But when you're in a section and you've got to make an accent with the band, you've got to be there.
So you have to kind of inhabit both worlds.
Yeah. I mean, funny, you just reminded me actually of talking about being tight and being on the beat. That band that I played in the 80s with the Zairean band, it was Zaire at the time, Fan Moses's band, Somo Somo. We used to rehearse one piece for like 2 hours, and his guitarist is going, "The groove is not right. The groove is not right." And I was going, "Sounds all right to me," But then after about an hour and a half, he's going, "The groove is right," and I go, yes. I can't really tell what's changed, but it feels different.
It's different, yeah.
And I don't think I've actually had that experience with any other band. Maybe a couple of times with Roberto playing in a live gig at the Club Bahia, thinking, I mean, this is sublime. This groove that's it.
That's it, yeah.
Nothing can improve this.
I mean, referring to, there's a piece that I sometimes play on the radio of yours called Jamuba.
Yeah.
That, yeah, and that's got some movement that every time I hear it, I'm like, wow, this is Shanti. This is like outrageous. The way that it moves, it creeps up on you.
Yeah. Well, actually, funnily enough, that's another tune where I spotted a similarity there's a bata rhythm, a Cuban rhythm called Chata Lo Guafun,
Okay.
which kind of goes, and then I thought, hang on, what about if that gum, the low pitch, which is on the 1,
Yeah.
what if that was on the 3? Then it suddenly becomes reggae.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the influence in that piece, because the drums, you've got the bata going, and then Davide Giovannini on drums. I put a section where it goes into reggae, but
Right.
the drums carry on. The bata drums carry on in there all the way through the piece. They never change.
Wow. Right.
And even the bass line never changes, even though where the 1 changes, the bass line never changes.
Oh, dear.
That was fun.
Yeah, because yes, Ivo, if you'd like to answer the next question.
Sure.
Yeah.
I've got this. How do you create tension and release in your pieces for large ensemble?
Right, good question.
Do you have like specific devices that you use, or is it something? How do you relate to tension and release in your writing? Is that something that you?
So yeah, you're making me think about this tune. There's a layering of tension and release. So in Latin music, you have the clave, and the 3 side is the syncopated side, that's tense, and then the 2 side is the on side, which is just on the beat, that's the release. And that normally happens bar to bar. Like 1 bar is tense, 1 bar is tension, and then the other bar is release. And then the harmony in a lot of salsa music has the 1-5-5-1 pattern. So you've got a tension and release happening. The 5 is the tension, because you've got the dominant resolving to the 1, but that happens over a 4-bar pattern rather than a 2-bar pattern. So you've got these 2 layers of tension and release. Now in my piece, the melody has got how many bars? It's probably got 24 bars or 12 bars. Yeah. Okay, so it's got 12 bars where you've got this Coltrane changes.
Okay.
And that's pretty tense.
Yeah.
So it needed,
like harmonically than the
it never releases, even though it's got little 5-1s in it. So there's that. But then it needed a 4-bar or 8-bar. I think it might be an 8-bar section where the harmony releases, and it just stays on 2, 5, 2, 5, 2, 5, 2, and then it goes back to 1, dun, 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 dun. So that's one method that's in the piece where you've got this build up of tension and then a release.
Right.
Then you've got the orchestration. There's a point in the piece where the saxophones all take a couple of bars solo each, and it starts sort of getting on top of each other, and then the brass behind has got this rising line, which is actually in whole tones, and it all builds up, and then it suddenly cuts, and then it leaves the piano chord. There's a real sense of release there.
Yeah.
So that's something you're thinking about continually, I guess. Like, I guess we all are as composers, right? Orphy, is just how we put this into our music and keep the listener engaged.
Yes.
In that way, it's like, because that exists in any style of music. If it's that's music, or if it's freely improvised music, it's where are the tension points? Where's the release points? There it's that kind of examination for me that's vital.
So, and I think telling the story of how the sort of music will move the narrative as well, bringing along the listener, which leads me to a question. Do you relate to the idea of an artistic inner well as a place from which to draw ideas from?
Do I relate to it? I suppose, apart from complete inspiration, most of us are just digesting what we experience, and then somehow working with it, and then creating things out of that experience. And I suppose that's why my music sounds the way it is because of what I've listened to my whole life. You know, I grew up listening to the playing the Western classical repertoire, and that gave me my sense of harmony, really, and melody probably as well. And then adding those influences of all the different musics I've played with, all the musicians I've played with. So in a well, I think that the well gets filled as you live, and then that's what you can draw from.
Do you think it's like a case of you are what you eat, in a way?
Yeah, definitely.
Because I mean, if you don't listen widely as you have, like this is really interesting because all of your influences, everything that you've absorbed, that's coming through in your music. And if you don't go through that process, then the music isn't as rich, I guess, or as it could be, or varied, or just doesn't have the depth in a way.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, you can't just go surface really and then use that, because it's not going to work. It's not going to be musically satisfying. You've got to really understand what it is that you're drawing from. So if you've got a project, right? Okay, I'm going to write a piece for balalaika and kora. If you haven't lived those two musics, it's not going to be the same as if you traveled around Russia and lived and experienced and Africa, So that's what I believe in, and that's the beauty of the London scene, is that you can spend a lot of time with musicians that are really steeped in tradition.
I suppose it's how you kind of relate to it, and as you've said, you really study that well of whatever that sound is. And many composers that I've spoken to, we sort of speak, how do you write for trumpets? Well, I become one, sort of thing. I'm the second trumpet for today, mentally writing this thing. So yeah, totally relate to that. And I'm sure composers listening in and watching this video as well will sort of relate to that as well. I think from choosing different writing methods as well, where do you start? Where do ideas start from? It's a good question.
It's amazing how they come from completely different experiences and well, things coming together. I mean, sometimes a piece, I'll just wake up and there'll be like, oh, I've got an idea, right, and it's there in like 2 minutes. And then other times I've written a piece that took me about 5 years to write, because I just had to I couldn't work out what the next bit was, and I finally got it,
I'd just like to say thank you to Shanti for his insight into his writing process, and it's been fascinating to hear where you get your ideas from and your experience and path as a musician. So thank you very much for that.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you, Ivo, and thank you, Orphy.
Thank you very much, Shanti. And we will hopefully get to hear this piece played within this recording. There'll be something, but also live one of these days. It'll be a real pleasure to actually hear that. Thank you very much.
Cheers. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.